a 1-minute review on yesterday's daf. So there was an issue where Rabbi Bar Nassan asked Rav Huna about the case of what happens with the husband and wife. If he injures his wife during marital relationships, what is the law? Do we say from this Mishnah that he has permission to be there, and he has permission to be there, like two people were walking, with one with a barrel and one with a beam, where the husband and wife give each other permission for intercourse? And we were saying that if she gets injured, she gave permission. Is there any issue there? So initially, it looks like there's no issue because they both have given permission for that sort of intimacy. But Rava has a question on Rav Huna, because he says a kol v'chomer will dictate the opposite. What is he saying? He uses the example of there are two people that share each other's domain. What are we talking about? An accidental murderer is that generally you have to share somebody else's domain. Why? Because in order to get tonked by your fellow and killed, you have to be in the same domain, So in that particular case, they're sharing a domain, and it could be, it's not like two people that have a conflict of a bar fight. It could be that the two of them went out to lunch together, and the guy said, listen, let's get dinner ready for the family. I'm going to go and chop some wood. He doesn't check his axe handle. And then lo and behold, it comes off and tonks and kills his mate. Then the whole family's after him. He's got a couple of days to go to the city of refuge. So in that case, they might have had permission and agreed to be in the same territory, but nobody gets permission to get tonked. And what do we say here? What's the evidence of it? Well, he has to run to the city of refuge, otherwise he's going to get killed by the relatives. So that seems like a contradiction to this Mishnah, that just because you are in the same domain and you both have permission to be there, that anyway is allowance for some sort of injury. The example I used is a septic tank. You have permission to empty your septic tank, but you don't have permission to injure somebody. Or the same thing of the other Mishnah, you've both got permission to have your ox in the public domain, but not for your ox to injure another ox for the carrying damage, just using that as examples. So what we're saying here is that maybe it's a different case here, because it doesn't mean that that it's necessarily the same, because Rava must conceal the conclusion he draws from the kol v'chomer of the Mishnah. What is this? That they both have permission to be there, because Rava answers, listen, in the Mishnah both are the same, but the problem is, in other words, what do we mean both the same? The destructive impact of the beam and the barrel is generated by the movement of both the one and the other, both the walk of the beam and the walk of the barrel. But we're saying here the wife is a passive party. It's the husband that gets the physical exercise done, and she lies there and he does the physical activity. We're not talking modern times where she's on top and the woman want to do everything. There, he's doing the activity. Okay, so she's a passive observer. So it says it's kind of weird that, because if you look at the halacha, it says it's written, and the people doing so will be cut off among the people. What's that saying? If you go to Leviticus chapter 18, verse 29, if you've got two participants in a forbidden sexual union, they both get the death penalty. If it's accidental, and she, for example, never knew that he was married, she has to bring a chatas offering, and they don't get the death penalty because they weren't witnesses. So he's saying in terms of legality and spiritual consequence, they both are liable. So, it says, it seems to imply from the very wording, if you look at, and the people doing so will be cut off from among their people. So doing so is an act by both the male and the female. So here we say it's doing so not in terms of actual physical activity, but because they both, the Gemara says, have pleasure from the act, and they both legally have consented to the act. But in fact, what we're talking about here is it's only him that does the act physically. So it can't be compared to the Mishnah, where both they physically rammed into each other. Here, the husband and wife weren't physically involved both. It's not like the barrel and the beam. Obviously, the beam owner seems to be the masculine party here for obvious reasons, the barrel owner female. But I'm going to leave that to your imagination. I might have to cut this part off on YouTube, I'm not sure. But I'm not trying to be crass.
But sorry, Damon.
Hang on, that's a summary of yesterday's duff. I hope I did okay in explaining it.
You didn't duff the duff.
No, I didn't duff the duff. We need a new joke, Kevin. You use that all the time. We need something fresh.
No, I haven't used it for about a year.
You've got a great imagination.
Damon is Bekitsur. Damon Bekitsur.
Yes.
I think it's if a married man has relations with a woman, as long as she's single, not married, it's not adultery. But if she's married and he has relations...
But Rabbi was just saying, he wasn't talking about the allowance of this or the non. He was just talking about the biblical verse saying that when it talks about bringing a chatas offering or forbidden act, it seems like both parties are involved. And we're saying that they are involved, but they're involved from a point the Gemara says where they both derive physical pleasure. Why does the Gemara bring physical pleasure and not just condoning the act? Because how do you think they got together in the first place? It's because it was fun. So that's how you get into trouble. Anything that's usually super fun is super forbidden, generally. Just saying. Okay, so that being said, you understand why our shiur won't be on the Haredi 100 list. Just saying. Okay, but be that as it may, let's go to the next part of the Gemara. I hope I've summarized it well. The Gemara now presents a discussion involving the portion of the Mishnah that reads, if one with the beam was first, etc. I think you remember that. There was the guy with the beam that was first and the guy with the barrel was behind him. So now we're talking about that particular part of the Mishnah, and we're talking about a discussion that Reish Lakish has on this. He said, if there were two cows in the public domain, one squatting and one walking, okay, then the walker kicked the squatter. She is not liable, but if the squatter kicked the walker, she is liable. Guys, you remember why? Because if somebody was doing something irregularly, and then the other person or the other animal acted irregularly back to them, that person that reacted irregularly to the irregular activity to begin with is not liable. I've often used this example. Arthur's there, he's minding his own business, he's having coffee with his wife Nadine, and then what happens is some guy comes and shouts at Nadine and pokes on the shoulder. He's going to get his head flattened by Arthur. Arthur's going to not repeat that. Why? Because what he should have done is said to Nadine, excuse me, listen, I was wondering if you could kindly, do such and such because I think you parked in my parking bay, or whatever it is. If he asked her gently and didn't accost her, Arthur wouldn't have thumped him. So therefore, because he acted irregularly towards Arthur, his wife, Arthur smashed the guy because he didn't know what this deranged person was acting irregularly towards his wife. Same thing, if maybe the guy propositioned Nadine and said, listen, would you like to go out with me on a date? Arthur would have said, listen, pal, she's married. If he groped her, Arthur's reaction might have been to grope his throat. So the irregular action will get an irregular response. So too with two animals. If the animal squatted in the public domain, because a public domain is not meant to sit and relax and smell the roses or eat the grass, as the saying would be for cows. The point of the public domain is that there is movement. And if a cow suddenly squatted and another cow rammed into it, you're dealing with a different degree of liability. So Reish Lakish proposes, if the one squatted in the front and the one behind kicked, the kicker is not liable because the squatter acted irregularly by squatting in a place where there's movement of animals. Fine, we understand that. However, if the squatter kicked the walker, she is liable. What does this mean? Well, the one that's squatting is doing the irregular activity, and now she's doing something irregular by kicking another animal that's walking normally. So therefore, that squatter is liable. It's different if the reaction of the walker is to kick the squatter because the cow sees another cow acting irregularly and reacts. Does that make sense? She smacks into her because the squatter suddenly stops, etc., etc. So that would seem to mimic this Mishnah. Why? Because let's say that the following clause of the Mishnah supports him. If the owner of the beam was first, okay, in other words, what do I mean first? In front of the person with the barrel, and the owner of the barrel was behind him, and the one behind walked too fast, and the barrel rammed into and was broken by the beam. The owner of the beam is not liable to pay for the barrel. Why? Because the owner of the barrel should have paced himself and seen how fast the one in front with the beam was walking. However, if the owner of the beam stopped short, causing the barrel to crash into the beam, he, the one with the beam, is liable to pay for the broken barrel. Why? Because if he suddenly stopped, how's the one with the barrel supposed to be liable? Yes, the one with the barrel smashed his own barrel against the beam, but it's only because the owner of the beam stopped suddenly without warning. Fair enough. So this would seem, on superficial value, to agree with Reish Lakish's ruling. Are you with me? Anybody see how it doesn't? Because it mimics it exactly. Guys, can you see?
Yeah.
In other words, the two cows. The one stops suddenly, and the other one kicks it or falls into it. Then obviously the one that stops suddenly can't hold the other one liable for smacking into it because it didn't give warning. It didn't slow down. The owner didn't say, wait, I can see my cow stopping. So therefore, it's the same as the beam guy suddenly stopping. Very simple. Right. Now, in a case where the owner of the beam, so if the owner of the beam, which is the squatter, suddenly kicks the person behind, in other words, stops suddenly with the beam to rest, then it's responsible for the kicking the one that's walking regularly. But if the so it mimics the Mishnah exactly. But there seems to be a dissenting opinion. What is this? The Gemara fine. The Gemara develops its proof. So now here in the case of the Mishnah, where the one with the beam stops short, causing the barrel to crash into the beam, is analogous to the squatter kicking the walker. How's it analogous? Because the one with the beam acted irregularly by stopping short in order to rest. That's according to Rashi. And thus is analogous to the squatter who acts irregularly by squatting in the middle of the public thoroughfare. Okay? Very straightforward. The Mishnah states that he is liable. Thus, the Mishnah supports Reish Lakish's ruling that the owner of the squatter is liable if she kicks the walker. So what do we mean? Okay, so one thing should seem puzzling to you guys. What is this? Is that generally that if any animal kicks another one in the public domain, you pay half damages for carrying tum. Okay? Just follow with me here. You pay half damages for carrying tum. And the fact that the kicker happened to be squatting at the time is certainly not a mitigating circumstance. Why? Because if anything, it's the squatter's ox's fault. Why? Because the squatter acted irregularly, and now she's kicking the one that's walking regularly. So you should be liable, right? So we're saying there's an interesting commentary by the Panay Yeshua that suggests that Reish Lakish refers to when the squatter kicked the walker as she stepped over the squatter. So what we're saying is here, it would seem that the squatter has self-defense. So that ox was coming to rest. Okay, she acted irregularly, but the normal reaction is if another animal crashed into her, she kicked out and lashed out in self-defense. So that's not a case of caring. What's a case of caring? A, unusual damage, and B, intent to injure or kill. What the squatter animal does is when the other walking animal crashes into it, it kicks out in self-defense because it doesn't want anything to land on it. And therefore it would seem normal, not in, ill intent, that its intent is to damage or kill, because that's generally what carrying is. It's unusual damage, and the animal's intention is to injure or kill. So you would think that the squatting animal isn't held liable for kicking the walker that crashes into it. Okay? So Reish Lakish has an innovation in that the squatter is liable even though she kicked the walker in order to protect herself from being stepped on, which would seem normal. Because since the squatter created the situation to begin with by acting irregularly and squatting in the middle of the public thoroughfare, the owner is liable to pay even though the actual damage was not one that would have been responsible for under normal circumstances. Okay? Which means that if, for example, the animal wasn't acting irregularly, okay, so it was in a more quiet part where they weren't expected to keep a decent pace, and another animal crashed into it, the squatting animal wouldn't be responsible for kicking in self-defense the walking animal. But here, Reish Lakish is saying it is responsible because the squatting animal, although it's entitled to defend itself, would never have to defend itself against an animal walking or crashing into it if it acted regularly, by not creating an irregular activity by squatting in the public domain, which is meant for pace and traffic. Does that make sense, guys? It should.
Yep.
Okay. So the Gemara now seeks to prove this ruling from our Mishnah, where the Mishnah rules that the one with the beam who stopped short must pay for the barrel, even though the one with the barrel has inflicted the damage on himself by crashing his barrel into a stationary beam. Because the reason is the one with the beam created the situation to begin with by acting irregularly and stopping short without warning. So therefore he is liable for damage, even though the act of damage itself is something that he wouldn't be responsible for with if he kept the proper pace. So what it's saying, even if the barrel guy moved in front of him, it's because he stopped. If he was keeping a normal pace and the barrel owner pace was too fast, but there wasn't anything wrong that the beam owner did and was keeping a regular pace, then it'd be fine. But just because the barrel smashed over the beam doesn't mean the beam owner is not responsible if he didn't give warning and he suddenly stopped. So this mimics the case exactly. So all good so far, guys? Yes or no? Yeah. Okay, let's go on. Cool. So there seems to be a challenge from the Gemara. It says, do you think so? Does the one who proposed this proof seek to prove Reish Lakish's ruling from here? So what it appears is that even though Reish Lakish has this ruling, Reish Lakish might not necessarily be bringing this Mishnah to prove his case. It might be one of his students that are bringing this case of Reish Lakish about the irregular reaction to an irregular behavior. So it's saying whoever brings this proof for Reish Lakish, it's not a proof from this Mishnah. In fact, it contradicts Reish Lakish's ruling with as follows, right? So Reish Lakish's ruling implies that the reason the squatter is liable is that she kicked the walker. But had the walker been injured on her own by tripping over the squatter, the owner of the squatter would not be liable. So what we're saying is here, fine, is that if an animal tripped over the squatter, you wouldn't be liable, okay? But it's not the case, because the case of the Mishnah is when the barrel is broken on its own, yet the Mishnah states he's liable. What do we mean? We mean that if another animal was walking and knocked into the squat and broke its leg, and you have to shoot the animal in the head, sorry, animal lovers, but in that case, to put the animal out of its misery, the squatting animal is not liable because it injured itself. But here we are saying something different. In the Mishnah with the human beings, we are holding that human being responsible so that if the barrel owner crashed into the beam, the barrel owner is not responsible, the beam owner. So it's different. Here, it's different. Can you see it's different? Okay. So we're saying, yes, if the squatter kicks a walking animal that crashes into it, the squatter is liable. But if the animal walks into the squatting animal without the squatting animal kicking, but injures itself so badly it breaks a leg and they have to shoot the animal, the squatting animal, even if it acted irregularly, is not responsible. So that doesn't mimic the Mishnah at all. But there's a reason. And the reason is as follows, is that basically the commentators say that the question of why the Gemara did not answer that the squatter is not liable if the walker is injured on her own is because the squatter in this case represents a boar, and one is not liable for a boar made by his animal. So again, if your animal decides to squat, okay, in the public domain, and then that is now a bore. What is a bore? A hazard and obstruction. You're not responsible because you never created it. This animal has a mind of its own and just suddenly squatted. It's not like you created a pit or you left the hazard in the public domain. This animal with its own brain decided to squat. And therefore, if another animal injured itself on the squatting animal, you're not liable at all. But it's different in the case of a beam because as a human being, if I stop to rest, I've got a brain and I can see that somebody is behind me or should take note of it and issue a warning. And if I don't issue a warning, man is always liable for his actions, whether awake or asleep. Does that make sense, guys? And therefore the culpability is higher here. So therefore the Mishnah doesn't reflect Reish Lakish's view on the two animals. We can see there is a problem. Fine. Let me go on quickly. We're on 32a3. Okay? So the Gemara defends Reish Lakish. The Mishnah refers to where the beam blocked the road like a carcass, in which the one with the barrel had no choice but to crash into the beam, since there was no way for him to detour around it. So what it's saying is here is that the Mishnah could refer to a beam. Gav, what's going on with your computer? I'm hearing noises. I'm hearing a lot of background noises, guys. Gavin, is it your computer or is it Kevin's?
Fine.
All right. Can I mute you, Gav? If you can't switch off the alarm. I can't see you, Gav. I can't even see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I put the thing down.
Okay, are you with me now, Butch?
Yeah, just mute me though.
All right, let's go again. All right, quickly, because we don't have much time. So the Gemara is going to give some defenses for Reish Lakish. It's saying, look, the Mishnah could refer to a case where the beam blocked the road like a carcass, in which the one with the barrel had no choice but to crash into the beam, since there wasn't a way for him to detour around it. So it said it might not be like the one is behind another, where the owner of the barrel could move away. Here the beam could have been across the whole road and the barrel owner had no choice but to crash around him, and that's why the beam owner is liable. Does that make sense? So that's the defense that the Mishnah could give. But another defense is on the commentators that have said that man is always liable for his actions. So it's different. So those, I prefer to go with the case of the commentators' rule, that man is liable for his actions, not stretching the Mishnah, okay? Even though the Gemara proposes this. However, Reish Lakish rules in a case where she squatted on the side of the street, meaning the animal, is a case in which the walker should have walked by the other side of the street and not stepped over the squatter altogether. So what is it actually saying? Is that, listen, it's different in the case of two animals, Gavin. Not only are you not responsible for your animal becoming a bore, a hazard in the public domain, because you can't control the thoughts of your animal, nothing stopped the other animal from moving out of the way, because the street is a big place. It didn't have to be stupid and crash into the other animal. If it injured itself, it's a moron, that animal. And it's not the squatting animal's fault. Does that, okay, it acted irregularly, but there's a long, big road. With the beam owner, it's saying that the beam could have been responsible because it could have blocked the entire road by being, instead of horizontal, it could have been perpendicular. So therefore we're saying that, as well as the fact that a human being has free choice, are the two reasons to obligate the owner of the beam, as opposed to the owner of the squatting animal. Does that make sense? Reason number one, squatting animal has no brain, the owner is not responsible. Reason number two is that the squatting animal, the animal that crashed into it, could have walked on the other side of the road. Or the owner of the walking animal could have veered its animal off the other side of the road, whereas not to crash into the other animal. So the Gemara seeks now to get support for Reish Lakish from maybe the end of the Mishnah also. So what does the end of the Mishnah say? If the owner of the barrel was first and the owner of the beam was behind him, now it's now the other way around. So again, the owner of the barrel now is in front and the owner of the beam is behind. Okay? and the latter one walked too fast, and the barrel was broken by the beam that rammed into it. The one with the beam is liable, since he should have slowed his pace and not crashed into the one in front of him. But if the owner of the barrel stopped short, causing the beam to crash into the barrel, the one with the beam is not liable. Okay, that's obvious. So the Gemara now develops its proof. Now here in the case of the Mishnah, where the one with the barrel stops short, causing the beam to crash into the barrel, it's analogous to the walker kicking the squatter. And the Mishnah states that he, the one with the beam, is not liable. So what it's saying is as follows. I'm just going to give you an example of what it's saying. Is that the owner of the squatter is liable only if the squatting animal kicks the walker, but not if the walker simply trips over her. Because the one with the barrel is like the squatter. Why? Since he acted irregularly by stopping short to rest, and the one with the beam is like the walker, since he is walking normally through the public thoroughfare. So, in other words, this case of the Mishnah where the one with the barrel stopped short can't mean that the traffic through the public thoroughfare was cut off, since the barrel is not large enough to seal off a major road. So the case of the Mishnah must be analogous to Reish Lakish's case, in which the one acting normally could have detoured around the irregular one, which is what we discussed. And still the Mishnah rules that the one acting normally is not liable to pay for damage it inflicts on the one acting irregularly, which actually supports Reish Lakish. So the Mishnah might absolve the second one from liability only where he inflicts the damage on the one who acted irregularly in the course of normal activity, such as walking. But the Mishnah says nothing about Reish Lakish's case where the second one does something irregular to the one who initially acts irregularly. So what it's saying is as follows. There is an objection. In the Mishnah, it speaks of the one with the beam is walking normally, and it's logical that he should be absolved from responsibility. Okay, why? Because the barrel owner stopped suddenly. But in Reish Lakish's case, the squatter can say to the walker, granted, you have permission to walk on me, right? Because you crashed in on me, I stopped suddenly. But to kick me, you have no permission. So what it's saying is, I don't know where we lost Arthur. What it's saying is you don't have permission. It is analogous to the Mishnah. You don't have permission to kick me, even though I'm stopping in the public domain and acting irregularly. You have permission to knock into me because you didn't see me, but not to kick me. So Reish Lakish's argument with the second part of the Mishnah stands, but it's saying that you had plenty of place to walk around, so you don't have permission to kick me, even though I've acted irregularly. Crashing into me, yes, but I'm not responsible for paying for you crashing into me because you could have walked around me. The street's a big place. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So right, as long as you can see that the analogy is the same with the walker and the squatter with the beam and the barrel owner, but it doesn't allow you to damage the other party, even if they were acting irregularly. In this particular case, although Reish Lakish does say in other cases that even the person bringing the Mishnah here is that if you acted irregularly upon, you can act irregularly back. Okay, Arthur's about to join us. All right, guys, I think we've hit enough. Gavin, we need time for you into Mincha. I'm just going to say
Damon?
to Arthur.
Okay, so can you just give an example?
Internet died. The whole phone died. So
no problem.
Damon,
Yeah.
just quickly for 1 minute before Gavin goes to Mincha, if someone acted irregularly towards someone else, they're allowed to take irregular action themselves. Could you just give another example of that?
Yeah, according to Reish Lakish,
the kick, yeah.
According to Reish Lakish, if there are two animals, and the first one acted irregularly, the other one that acted irregularly in reaction to the first one that caused that irregular behavior, the owner is not liable. That's according to Reish Lakish. What we're saying in this Mishnah is the end of the Mishnah would seem to mimic it. However, we hold the we hold the squatting animal, the one that kicked the squatting animal, liable, because even though the squatting animal acted irregularly, the animal that kicked the squatting animal doesn't have a right to do it, because the owner of that kicking animal could have directed the animal out of the way of the squatting animal, because the squatting animal, it's a big road, only took some of it. So the kicking animal has no right to kick the squatting animal because there's plenty of road. It's different if there was no extra space and it kicked in reaction because there was no other choice. But the owner of the kicking animal is liable to injury payment to the squatting animal because there's plenty of road where the owner of the walking animal could have led its animal without it aggravating the squatting animal. That's number one. But if the walking animal walked into the squatting animal and injured the squatting animal, it's not the walking animal's fault because walking is normal. It's equivalent to the barrel owner walking and the beam owner stops, and therefore it crashes his barrel. In that particular case, the squatting animal's owner is liable for the hazard caused because the animal didn't kick, which is an irregular behavior, but walked irregularly and was damaged by the squatting animal. So here we can see that if you're using this Mishnah as a proof, you can't say that if you do more than what is irregular to the irregular animal, you're liable from this Mishnah. Although Reish Lakish holds that you can, but not if you use this Mishnah as an example. That's all we say.
Scott.
All right, guys, we're going to end on this note because we need Gavin. We don't want him to run because as we learn in the next Mishnah, running incurs its own liability. So therefore, even though you can run for a mitzvah, we want Gavin to have plenty of time. We're going to end now. There's 6 minutes left. Have a wonderful day, guys. Arthur, I'm so happy to see you well. May Hashem bless you, my friend.
Amen.
Yeah, you imagine this, Dad. I got out of hospital just having it done, and I walked 2 kilometers carrying a bag on my back. I couldn't walk up a hill carrying a bag on my back.
Incredible. Hashem blessed you and we covenant for you.
Yeah, they're still looking at me like, why am I alive? Because, my central one that was open, that's the one that was blocked also in some of it. So they managed to open it up and...
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie. Part of when I was davening is I love you as a mate and I want you to live as a mate. And also I thought, what happens to the business if you disappear? I can't help it.
You know what happened? They managed to find that place that nobody else could find.
Yeah. So listen, I'm so happy you're back, mate, and I'm so happy they never had to do a procedure.
No, they're just basing it out.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. The first thing is we're going to have Kevin teach us, and then we're going to send a new link. Gavin, I'm aware that show comes in at 6:15. Is that right? Or 6:20?
6:20.
I don't know.
I'm aware. So Kevin, start. Give us only a few minutes so that we can send another link to the 40-minute show.
Okay.
And Steve, thanks for joining us. It's like a psychedelic effect on your roof there. I don't know what it is, but it's brilliant.
Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Are you all ears, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, business activities. Pursuing your business or speaking thereof, even if it's not a malacha, shouldn't be done. It says one may not engage in any business activity on Shabbos, even if no malacha is taking place. The prophet Nehemiah describes those who buy and sell on Shabbos as desecrators of Chilul Shabbos. One may not earn money on Shabbos. Even a permissible activity such as babysitting or catering may not take place unless it is also provided outside Shabbos hours and payment is made on a weekday. There is a view that permits the receipt of earnings for the performance of a mitzvah, for example, conducting a shul service. And as last 2 points, it is not permitted to state one's intention about business or financial issues. However, money matters related to tzedakah may be discussed. One may say how much one will donate to a particular cause. The concern to keep business activity out of our minds is demonstrated by the text of our prayers. Amidah of Shabbos amidst the standard weekday blessings, since they relate significantly to material needs.
5:30 p.m.
Okay, I think.
On that note, I want to ask you something, Kev. Just one quick question,
Yeah.
if I may, is that so there are a couple of things very quickly. The first thing is that I've made a concerted effort not to speak about business matters on Shabbat, particularly personal business matters. And then
Yeah.
if I see somebody like I used to at Shul that I had something to speak about, I said, listen, I don't want to speak about it on Shabbos. Can I call you after Shabbos for the business thing? And if I knew they were a person that couldn't stand the curiosity, I'd say, listen, there's something I want to speak to you about personally, but I'm in a rush. Can we speak after Shabbos? Because sometimes if you say it's business, the ears prick up, the greed starts to pump through the heart, and they say, well, what is it? What is it? What business? So, I sometimes do it like that. Or sometimes what I'll do is I won't discuss any sort of business. What I do sometimes enjoy, because it's my only reading, is reading business books. But that's not because I'm conducting business. That's because I'm the subject matter, like psychology.
Sorry, it's just Steve. Can you just turn your volume? Put it on yourself on mute. Sorry, mate.
I don't know if it's
Steve.
computer. I'm putting it on mute. I've done it. It's cool.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay. So say again. But is it not? You're not supposed to talk about what you're going to do on Motzei Shabbos on Shabbos.
Yeah. So no. Sometimes if I have to get hold of somebody, I'll say to them, "How do I get hold of you?"
Okay. Yeah.
I don't have their contact number. Sure. Do you know this common person? But I don't. But that's if it's something urgent. I don't discuss business matters on Shabbos. I must say, it's an absolute bracha from Hashem, because I asked Hashem, I said, please, I don't want to have to discuss or think about business on Shabbos, but please don't make anything worrying on a Friday afternoon for me to worry about over Shabbos. And Hashem has been so kind to me that there's generally nothing that he hasn't taken care of on a Friday afternoon that I don't have to worry on Shabbos. Generally, sometimes you can have a conflict, but Hashem's kindness has prevented that on a Friday, and generally is prevented it completely. So that's been amazing, so that I haven't had to worry about it.